So, it's been a while. Hasn't been a lot of videos, just in general. And my ideas are virtually non-existent, even though I have an entire... Let me take these off because I look retarded with them on. I look retarded in general, but especially with large headphones on. I think that's just kind of a product of humanity. The only people that look good with those on are sexy trans women on Twitter, like my wife. But anyway, I haven't had many ideas for videos, and in general, I have lacked the motivation to create videos. I think back in like 2019, 2020, these times on my channel, I had a particular infatuation with creating content about things like being in need, being in your room all the time, doing things that are relatively mundane or boring. I found so much joy in that lifestyle and in that way of being that I wanted to share it with absolutely everyone. Everyone needed to know the prophecy of the NEET and why I was the pseudo-religious figure that would come and bring all the NEETs together and do whatever nonsense I thought I was doing. I think there was a kind of grandiosity to my videos at that time. And this created a sort of situation where there were people that really hated me. And I can understand why they did. While I tried to be humble because I thought that was the right thing to do, there's kind of this like inherent smugness to those videos that I dislike. And now, again, it's not present in all of them. It's just certain ones where I feel like I beat up way too much on so-called normies in an attempt to distinguish myself from the average population instead of looking at commonalities I had with them and seeing the fact that we're all not that different from one another. I was attempting to do the opposite of reconciliation, which is find your common ground, and instead I was hyperfixating on the things that distinguished me and others from everyone else, and making the case that somehow that made me a better person. Somehow, me being in my room all the time and doing nothing made me a better person. It didn't make sense. The arguments I was making in those videos oftentimes did not make sense. And they had a sort of pseudo-religious bent to them, almost as though I was presenting myself as a kind of messiah. And I look at a lot of that stuff, and not only do I feel like the topics touched on are too depressing, you know, talking about feeling sad and wanting to kill myself and all these bad memories I had, there was a particular fixation on negativity, on events, and it wasn't constructive the way that I'd talk about that stuff. I'd put a video out and then feel better afterwards because I got it all out venting, and in a sense that was positive. But you also have to consider what that is doing to the audience. The audience is going to watch that video. They're going to feel bad. They're going to be potentially influenced by that video to think in ways that are unhealthy, that are unproductive. And so, even as a small creator, you have a responsibility for the things you put out to be productive, to be a positive influence on the people watching. Now, that isn't to say that I personally don't enjoy content that is a little bit more negative, a little bit more sad, a little bit more deconstructive. I do like a lot of that stuff, but I like it with the understanding that the things being said in those videos are not correct, that they're a bad influence and they shouldn't be followed. But not everyone is going to take that approach of keeping that in the back of their mind. And I feel stuff like that influencing me sometimes, even with this understanding. If you watch it too much, it gets in your head. That's why I can't watch the live streamer Michael Does Life. If you watch his streams, they're totally and completely negative. All it is just everything in the game industry is bad, everyone sucks, all media is bad, get a life, loser. That's all his streams are. And you watch that every single day, and you can't help but just feel depressed because it's so much negativity. And I believe that's the case with some of my old videos, with so much of the crap that you find on YouTube. Eventually it does seep into your mind if you watch it too much. And so I developed this mindset that I have a responsibility to my audience and that I ought to talk about things in a more constructive way. That is why when I did the video on my therapist ghosting me, by the way, that was all just a misunderstanding. I came to find out later that it was just a scheduling conflict, and I resumed appointments with that therapist. He's very helpful, as I said in the video. So I was not ghosted. But even when I did that video, when I thought I was ghosted, I still said that therapy is a good option for me and that I'm going to continue looking at it to try and improve myself. I talked about myself in a fairly sympathetic but not self-loathing way, and that was deliberate. These videos where I talk about negative things but then give the caveat that it will get better and that I am a good person and that other people are generally good and that, you know, things will get better over time. All those caveats that I give and the specifics as to how that's the case, you know, those good things I mentioned as to how they're the case, I give specifics on that as well to kind of even out the videos to make them not wholly negative. Because if you get too much of that in your brain, it's just going to fuck you up, or at least it does that to me. Maybe there are people out there who are more mentally strong than me. That's really fucking cool. I respect that, but I know for me, this is how it works, and I assume for other people it probably works the same, at least some of them. And that is why I don't engage in the kind of rhetoric or speaking styles that I used to engage in back in 2020 and 2019 and 2018. Even though I love a lot of those videos when I look back on it, some of those videos I cringe real hard at because the elitism is just so innate to the topics that I discuss. A lot of the time, the premises that I'm coming from, that I'm building all my arguments around, is this notion that other people are bad, other people are normies, normies equal bad, and you can simplify all of civilization and human behavior down to that, which is just an insane proposition. Like, I don't think those premises are correct, but I would form these giant, like, grand narratives just out of that. And you could really see how I was experiencing a kind of cognitive distortion at all times. My beliefs were so out of line with reality. And I ended up coming to terms with that later on, pretty soon after I became legally an adult. But there were still many, many things that I needed to deconstruct. There are still now many things that I need to deconstruct. But the fundamental point here is that the videos need to have a positive message. And if it's a bad day for me, and I've been having a lot of those, if it's a bad day for me, I don't want to sit in front of the camera and whine about it, because what does that do for other people? What does that do for the viewers of my channel? Besides, I mean, I was going to say abuse them. That's kind of a strong word. I shouldn't use that there. But I don't know, like, it put them through what I'm going through, so I'm going through something now everyone else has to. I don't think that's particularly fair. I mean, they can always click off the video or not click it, but those kinds of messages, looking back, they come off as fishing for pity, fishing for someone to say, hey, it's okay, it's all right, everything's going to be okay. It's like, why would I need random strangers to do that? I have a fucking wife, for God's sakes. I don't need your affirmation. I appreciate it when people bring it along. People say very nice things in the comments, and I always appreciate it a lot. But I'm not looking for that. And so there's no point to doing the videos where I'm just going on and on about how bad things are. Even though there's been, some bad things going on in my head, I don't want to talk about it. And that is one of the main things that has changed on this channel, I think, at least, is my approach to these topics. But these kinds of topics make up the bulk of my channel. If you look through my channel, there's recently a lot of political stuff that's kind of new for me. It's in the last year and a half. But most of it, if you discount the videos deconstructing the meta of the internet or whatever, most of the videos are just me whining and complaining, to be frank, about mental health problems or perceived inadequacies in myself and in society and others. And I try not to come off like I am whining. I try to articulate those topics in a careful and fair way while giving deference to the other parties that may disagree, may see things differently. And I try to come out with a positive message at the end each time. I don't know if everyone makes it to the end of those videos, but that tends to be how I conclude them, is on some positive note. Now, I came to learn that that's really important for me, that everything ought to end on a positive note. And there are cases where I've made videos that ended on a negative note, and it was beautiful. I mean, artistic. I don't care if I sound like I'm stroking myself by saying that, but there are certain videos where it is just screaming into a void without much of a positive message that I believe are really, really good. An example of that is a video called "The White South African Genocide is Real." I'd recommend watching the entire thing. Another example of that is a not-so-surrealist manifesto about heartbreak and moving on. Both of those videos are very negative, but they deal with the topics in an artistic way. And they end on negative notes, but they deal with that in an artistic way. Now, I was catching lightning in a bottle with both of those videos. I don't think I can exactly recapture that. Probably not, but I don't have to because those videos exist. And ultimately, my mindset has changed. My approach to all of this has changed. And I would like for this channel to inspire people, to help them grow, to provide insight and advice that may challenge their preconceptions and transform them as people and their behavior and their outlook. Because at the end of the day, there are two versions of ourselves. There is the version that we display to other people, which is the most agreed upon version of ourselves because it's the one that you can gather evidence for existing, And then there's the second version of ourselves, the one that exists in our mind. And when it comes to that guy, we just kind of have to trust each other as to who that guy is. But only we know who that guy is. And we can change who that guy is internally, but it cannot be imposed upon us because they only exist for us. That perception of who we are only exists for us. And to change that in a fundamental way is to look at oneself and speak to oneself. it's not a result of having been spoken to. Of course, those ideas from others can inspire a change like that, but at the fundamental level, you have to be the catalyst. And I think I've had an internal change like that, a change that exists only in my mind, but now it's downstream affecting how others see me as well, because it now my behavior's changed, and the other version of myself has also changed. So that was kind of a rambly, bizarre philosophical tangent, but I don't have a lot of juice to make videos the way that I used to, because a lot of the videos revolved around stuff that I don't think is healthy for any of us to have on this channel and to watch. I want to be a positive force, and if that means making less content in general, if that means having less viewers in general, then so be it. But I have changed, and I think getting married had a lot to do with that. It had a lot to do with how much I was willing to look at my outlook and expand it. It changed how willing I was to not be lazy, but to instead exert control over myself and actually be voluntary in how I behaved, instead of just thinking almost like an animal at times. I feel like for the longest time the ability to initiate and persist in self-directed, purposeful activities was just not my thing. It was just not my thing. But now I do it all the time, because you have to do that when you have someone that loves you and depends on you. And that also changes how you see other people, because those other people are human just like you. This is something I've always recognized and seen, but you see it in so much deeper, so much more vibrant of a way when you're intimate with someone and dedicate the rest of your life to them. I mean, you can imagine the amount of things that go into that. But that experience has also made me a hell of a lot more gentle towards everyone, because the change that I made internally to be gentle towards her is a change that's going to affect my behavior across the board, because the way that I think has changed. And that also happens to influence the way that I think about my content, because I have a responsibility to do the right thing here as well, not just in real life, or the so-called real life. The internet is real life now. There are real people interacting on it. Arguably it's always been real life because of that. And you have a responsibility to behave in the right way, to say things carefully, and to, I'm repeating myself, but to do the right thing. It's my responsibility. And at that point, I have to ask myself, do I want to be someone who makes other people sad with their content? Or do I want to be someone who lifts other people up? Based on everything I've said in this video so far, it should be obvious which one I would like to be.